Hello, I'm Ty Coulter, and welcome to the Sports Backroom. Join me as I go through the files and search every nook and cranny to tell you the underappreciated and often forgotten stories of sports history. So, sit back and relax as I tell you the story of the forgotten NASCAR champion. The term Mickey Mouse Championship or Mickey Mouse Ring has been used in the last several years to describe championships that may be tainted in some way. In a way, it's kind of Gen Z lingo for putting an asterisk on someone's accomplishments. The phrase comes from the Los Angeles Lakers 2020 NBA championship that they won in a quarantine bubble at Walt Disney World. Now, despite the recent nickname and use, this kind of critique of champions and their achievements goes way back in sports history and spreads into all sports, even motorsports. In the world of NASCAR, most of these critiques come from a separate debate, mostly on the playoff system that was introduced in 2004. But before that, there were a few separate NASCAR championships that received some ire and some public opinion, while some, such as the 1985 championship of Darrell Waltrip, are really more critiques of the point system at the time. There are two instances where penalties impacted the final result. The first was 1990, and it is easily the less warranted of the two. Mark Martin received a 46-point penalty at the second race of the year at Rockingham for an illegal carburetor spacer. The penalty itself was interesting and drew ire from fans and media alike, as the illegal part was not performance enhancing. ESPN analyst and former NASCAR champion Benny Parsons said of the penalty,
"They fined him $40,000 and 46 points. I mean, that's like hanging a guy for shoplifting."
Martin would go on to lose the championship to Dale Earnhardt by 26 points. The reason this is less egregious than the other instance and the topic of today's episode is because, looking back, both these guys are still legends in the sport. Both are Hall of Famers, and it's going to be a tough battle between the two no matter what. The same cannot be said about the 1950 NASCAR Championship. Championships are supposedly the key to sports immortality, a one-step way to silence all the doubters and enshrine yourself with the greats. This can be said no matter the sport, no matter the era. This cannot be said for Bill Rexford, the first NASCAR champion with an asterisk to his name. Rexford was born in 1927 in the Conewaga Valley in New York. He grew up around his father's Chevrolet dealership. This is where he would prepare his first race cars to begin to compete in the local area. One track in particular was Pennyroyal Raceway in Leon, New York. The former horse track turned farm turned car racing track was one of the fastest dirt tracks in the area, and Rexford found success. With this, Rexford garnered the eye and support of promoter Ed Otto. The list of Otto's titles and accomplishments could go on forever, and potentially warrants its own episode. But what you need to know is that Otto was one of the near 20 promoters that gathered together in Daytona Beach during the winter of 1947 to create NASCAR. Otto would help Rexford buy a new car with the promise that he would run it in the newly found series down south. Rexford would enter 3 of the 8 races in the inaugural season of the NASCAR Strictly Stock Series in 1949. He quickly showed promise as he notched 2 top 5s and finished third at his last race of the year at Heidelberg Speedway in Pennsylvania. With a few warm-up races under his belt, Rexford was ready to make a charge at the championship in 1950 with new car owner Julian Buesink. 1950 would be a great year for Rexford. In a time where a key part of winning the title was just actually making the races, Rexford would run 17 of the 19 events in the year. This, along with a Memorial Day victory in Canfield, Ohio, and an average finish of 10.8, would clinch him the championship over Fireball Roberts by 110.5 points. With the win, Rexford became the youngest champion in NASCAR Cup Series history, a feat he holds to this day, and became the only NASCAR champion from New York. While celebration took off amongst Rexford and crew, quickly a sense of a tainted championship occurred. Don't touch that dial. Keep it on the Sports Backroom with Ty Coulter. Now, back to the episode. While Rexford had some good stats, such as his average finish and top 5 and 10 count, there was one driver in the field that outdid him, Mr. Lee Petty. The patriarch of the legendary NASCAR family was also looking for his first title, and if you lined up both he and Rexford's stats, some things don't add up. While Rexford had 11 top 10s, Petty had 13. While Rexford had 5 top 5s, Petty had 9. And while Rexford had an average finish of 10.8, Petty had an average finish of 7.7. So, what went wrong? Why didn't Petty even finish second despite racing in 8 more races than Fireball Roberts? NASCAR was still a fledgling series at the time, and it was attempting to finally organize the somewhat chaotic world of stock car races. One way they did that was by trying to limit outlaw promotions. NASCAR and its owner, Bill France, demanded loyalty to achieve this, and would penalize anything they considered to be detrimental to the sport of stock car racing and the business of NASCAR. This would be proven time and time again in the future. For example, in the 1960s, France banned arguably one of the most popular drivers at the time, Curtis Turner, for attempting to unionize the drivers. While that is one of the more popular cases of this, one of the very first instances was against Lee Petty in 1950. Petty would race in a few non-NASCAR or quote-unquote outlaw races, and would be harshly penalized. Essentially, they removed all of his points up to that moment. This would result in a penalty of 809 points towards Lee Petty. The margin between Rexford and Petty? 369. A near 500-point deficit erased just like that. With this asterisk in some minds, Rexford began to feel unwelcome and unappreciated by the NASCAR community. This, along with an injury in a crash at Canefield Speedway in 1951, led to Rexford beginning to slow down his NASCAR efforts and briefly run races sanctioned by the Midwest Association of Race Cars. After the drivers who replaced him in these MARC rides passed away in wrecks, Rexford gave up auto racing entirely and moved to Arizona with his wife. There, he would start a trucking business and refrain from the limelight. Nearly 35 years later, in 1987, he would reappear at a NASCAR event in Atlanta. Not much is known about this event, other than the fact that the event organizers failed to find an Oldsmobile 88 similar to his championship-winning car. With that, I would assume this event was a part of the championship week festivities that year. The Nashville Network would also interview him for a part of a race weekend broadcast at Phoenix Raceway in 1991. Once again, this interview was almost lost to time, but is now available on the Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame website. Rexford would pass away on March 18, 1994, after a battle with an illness. Post-death, he would be inducted into the New York State Auto Racing and Friends of Auto Racing Hall of Fames. He would also be inducted into the Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame in 1997. Rexford's legacy is a complicated one. By all measures, he should be remembered more. He was the second all-time NASCAR Cup Series champion. He is still the youngest NASCAR Cup Series champion of all time, and was the first NASCAR champion from outside the South, paving the way for Alan Kulwicki in 1992, and more recently, Martin Truex Jr. and Joey Logano. Despite these accolades, Rexford would be the only champion excluded from NASCAR's 50 Greatest Drivers of All Time list in 1998, which celebrated the best 50 drivers in the first 50 years of NASCAR. He wouldn't even be added to the additional 25 that was added in 2023 when the list was expanded to 75 for the 75th anniversary. He is also the only champion, not including those currently ineligible due to recent retirement or currently driving, to not be inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. Rexford hasn't even been an official nominee to be considered to be an inductee, which has caused some stir. In an Auto Week piece by Al Pierce, NASCAR Hall of Fame director Winston Kelly said that Rexford had been discussed over the years, but just never got onto the list. Some say it was a southeast bias. He was one of the first guys from up north, a Yankee coming down to drive in NASCAR. Kelly denies that this bias exists, as there are guys from the modified series in the Northeast inducted, such as Richie Evans. Also in the piece, Richard Petty, the son of Lee Petty and the king of NASCAR, showed support for Rexford by saying, no matter what anybody won, 16 races or one or none, anybody who wins our championship belongs. While Rexford may not have the recognition he deserves, he still has some supporters. President of the Chautauqua County Hall of Fame, Randy Anderson, says, he had a short career, so we understand what he's up against. We know he's the forgotten champion, but we're still proud of him. Bill Rexford may be the forgotten champion of days gone past, but there are still those keeping his story alive. And maybe one day he will be enshrined among the NASCAR legends and leave the sports backroom. Thank you for listening to the Sports Backroom with Ty Coulter. Shout out to Al Pierce at Autosport and the Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame for keeping Bill Rexford's story alive. Links to both their pages will be in the show notes. Remember to like and subscribe to the podcast for future episodes. Be sure to check out our website, thesportsbackroom.weebly.com. Also, be sure to check out our YouTube page, where full episodes of the show are also posted. This has been a production of the Sports Backroom with Ty Coulter.